So, upriver, at the intersection of the North Fork near 8 Mile, and from there coming downriver, I chair a nonprofit that acquires wildlife habitat, particularly moose habitat. And we're trying to acquire large parcels along that corridor, river corridor, as it wraps around that corner and heads downriver. And our funding is, hopefully, our funding will come from funds out of the Pittman-Robertson kitty, which is created from your ammunition taxes. So ammo taxes across the country get divvied out to the states. The state of Alaska has been giving millions of dollars back every year, unable to spend it for lack of anybody to administer grants. So Paul Seaton got a couple of employees hired up, and whether they're still there or not, I don't know, but that money, we've been told, won't go back. And so we've been working with various entities, the Land Trust, one of them. One of my board members is with Fish and Game headquarters in Anchorage, and he kind of has his finger on how this is going, and it was going along. And then we have a new governor, and so now we have a new wildlife director who makes the decisions on what projects get funded. And it looks like we should be good to go in July, which is the next funding cycle. And so access to the river, hunting access, that stretch is has an extremely dense population of spawning kings. And we're hoping to continue to acquire corridor along the watershed and in the river bottom along there for quite a ways, for maybe a couple miles downstream. So it's a big, expensive, ongoing venture, but it gives us an opportunity to pick up spawning habitat and moose migration corridors. So we're pretty excited about that. And Sue, one of the things, can you come up for a second, please? I gotta put you on the spot. So there's a lot of people here that weren't here a year ago when we did this at the senior center, and one of the things that didn't get touched on that fascinates some of us is that Cook Inletkeeper had a FLIR flight. Go for it. Tell us about that.
Sure. This was back in 2010 to 2012, and FLIR is basically they take a picture of the river from an aircraft that gives them a temperature signature of the river. And so in a 2 or 3 hour flight, they can fly most of the river and tell you what the temperature is in that moment. It doesn't tell you about anything other than that period of time, but it tells you kind of the contrast of where the hot spots are and where the cold spots are. And if you're like me, get really geeky on maps and temperature and data and all that, it was really exciting to look at how the landscape creates really different temperatures across the whole river system. But the funnest part was when Lynn and Steve came and joined me at my GIS computer, which is basically where you make the maps, and we kind of fact-checked each other. And they had real knowledge about where the fish are, and I had some knowledge about where the stressful temperatures and where the good temperatures were. And we found places where they never see fish. They're just, the fish just like, they go from one spot and they zoom through this one area. Well, sure enough, that is a very warm stretch of water above Beaver Creek. Not quite sure why yet. I mean, we don't know all of our groundwater, we don't understand all of our groundwater patterns and pathways, but their observations of years of fishing on the river really corroborated the idea that the fish are responding to different temperatures. But it was also really cool to see that, so these cold places in the summer, that's because there's groundwater that's feeding directly into the river, right? In the wintertime, that water is also moving in, but in the winter, that's actually warm water, right, relative to the rest of the surface water. And when you have groundwater coming into a river and oxidizing, it interacts with the oxygen, you often get sort of a rust color. You'll see that. Sometimes people are afraid it's some kind of a pollution, but really it's just the iron in our water, in the groundwater, is oxidizing, and you get kind of a rustiness. Well, you asked about, I think, the orange rocks and what those were about, and it turns out that those were places that they knew from the winter time, as you have to stay away from those areas in the wintertime because your snow machine might fall in because it's really mushy there. Well, it turns out those are places where groundwater was coming in, and they knew those as the places where the orange rocks were, but they didn't really know the process. Like, why was there orange? Why was there groundwater? Why was that orange, the iron from the groundwater? So it was kind of a neat opportunity to take the observations of people who know this river intimately, and then seeing how the science that we're gathering matches up with that and how those pieces interact. And also, you know, there might be places where we think the data says there should be fish here, and they know that there aren't. And so then there's a whole new study to be written about. Heck not. So, yeah, so it's great. It was very, that's among my 2 favorite hours of my 19-year career.
You mentioned Beaver Creek. Did you mean Ruby Creek or Blue?
No, up at Beaver Creek.
Yeah, up at Beaver
Way in Beaver Creek. There's a 2-mile stretch above there.
I know that.
Yeah.
We were on there.
So Beaver Creek is brings in lots of nice cold water through all those. There's a big wetland complex there, the Beaver Creek Flats, and then right below there is nice.
Down below my place, even when you get on the swamps and go upriver, there's some, in the wintertime, there's these nice green pools sitting along there. My wife says, "Oh, there's hot spring. I'm going to jump in." It was ice cold.
Degrees,
It was ice cold. And she just went straight down. But it was warm water.
It was warmer relatively,
It was
right? And so then
Yeah.
that's where the fish are hanging out in the wintertime.
Yeah, okay. After you mentioned Beaver Creek, I never with all that rest of it.
Yeah. Well, it's all really cool and connected and complex.
So what you didn't get into there was when we looked at our map, there was dark purple spots along the river where these groundwater sources were sitting. And since then, when we realized that those are the source of warm and cold water that keeps our temperatures leveled off, we started to target those for acquisition. So if those parcels came up for sale and we could possibly buy them, we started to target those so we can hold on to those and they don't get developed. So that was a pretty cool part of that whole process, and I wanted to share that. And then the other thing was the Ruby Creek fish pipes or the new culverts that DOT is going to put in. Carol Kirkfleet and a permitting gap. Who was it from Anchorage? Julian.
Yeah.
And came down and managed to drag Steve and I out and look at some of these culverts. And we got excited about getting DOT on board to get these fish culverts set in right and make sure they didn't do it the quick, easy way, which has killed a lot of our fish habitat in the past. Steve, tell us what Ruby Creek used to look like before those culverts went in.
When I was a kid, there was no culverts or anything down there, and that creek, and when you're a kid, you
Jesus, how long ago was it?
After the Civil War.
Okay. Anyway, you know, I would say, I honestly say there was 500 silvers in that little creek that used to be there every year. And when they put the culverts in, when they put the North Fork in, when they rerouted the river, now I understand there's a few fish in. A few. But that was a real producing silver. Not king's head, but silver. And I honestly think there was 500 fish in that creek. But well, it used to be that they used to spawn them. But that was so we lost how much of that creek? A lot.
So they're
Half a mile,
so
maybe?
in the 60s they rerouted Ruby Creek into an old Anchor River bed on the west side of the highway, and it's just kind of silted in there, and it appears pretty useless right now. And we're pretty excited because the culverts that are on Ruby Creek now are perched and function quite poorly, and we're hoping that we can get some rearing habitat back in the entire Ruby Creek drainage. So the rearing habitat has been identified as the shortfall in the Anchor River for Chinook and Coho. And so it's going to be an easy fix. DOT is going to go in there anyway. If they'll put the fish culverts in, we might get a big stretch in a mile or better of productive habitat back. So that's kind of cool. And that's about all I had. I found this on my computer and I thought it was worth reading here, so bear with me. I'm not sure who wrote it. As I think about all that's happened on the Kenai in the past 30 years, I'm reminded of Bill Platts, a U.S. Forest Service biologist who came to Soldotna from Idaho to talk to the River Advisory Board in 1985, when that group was working on a plan to protect the river. One of the country's foremost experts on salmon streams and how they function, Platt spoke with the utter conviction of someone who had seen productive salmon streams die. His words struck me as a warning and a clarion call to action. Take care of the watershed first, because that takes care of the river. If human needs are put ahead of the needs of the watershed, soon there will be no resources. As the resources go, so go I. I thought that was kind of cool. That's one of the things we're all here about. So.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you.
Good.